Welcome to the Ignorant Artist Podcast. Last episode, we spent time inside the scriptorium, a cold stone room, monks, silence, sacred work, every letter placed with reverence and care. Then someone drew a rabbit hanging a hunter from a tree, and a knight being terrorized by a snail, and a man playing a trumpet with his butt. These are real. They are the manuscripts that were considered holy objects. They are in Bibles and Psalters and books of hours that took years to make and cost fortunes to produce. Nobody knows exactly why. That's what we're here to figure out. I'm Don Hudgens. This is Ignorant Artist, and today we go inside the margins.
Before we open a single manuscript, take a look at the world that produced them. Europe, around 1300, was not a continent of nations as we understand them today. It was a patchwork of kingdoms, principalities, and city-states dominated by two great powers. The Holy Roman Empire, which stretched from Germany all the way down through most of Italy, and the Catholic Church, whose papal state sat at the heart of that peninsula. France was consolidating into something recognizable. England was a kingdom apart, and Italy, the Italy we know today, did not exist at all. What we call Italy was mostly Holy Roman territory, with the Pope carving out his own domain in the middle. This matters because the manuscript tradition grew directly out of that political and religious landscape. The church was the empire's conscience. The monastery was the empire's library. And the scriptorium was where both met on the page. Open a medieval manuscript to almost any page, and you will find the text you expect. Scripture, law, medicine, philosophy. The careful work of trained scribes, letter by letter, word by word. Then look at the edges, in the margins, in the borders, in the spaces between columns and at the bottoms of pages. Something else entirely is happening. A soldier battles a giant snail. A fox preaches to a congregation of geese. A rabbit, armed and triumphant, drags a human hunter by the heels. This is Marginalia. And it is one of the strangest, funniest, and most revealing things the Middle Ages left behind. The word comes from the Latin margo, meaning edge or border. Marginal notes and drawings appear in manuscripts from at least the 9th century, but the golden age of truly wild marginalia runs roughly from 1250 to 1350. That 100-year window produced some of the most elaborate and bizarre illustrated borders in the history of art. The most famous examples come from northern France, Flanders, and England. The Luttrell Psalter, the Smithfield Decretals, the Rutland Psalter. Open any of these and the borders are alive with acrobats, musicians, hybrid creatures, and scenes of everyday life that have no obvious connection to the sacred text they surround. Here is the question that has bothered art historians for generations. Who authorized this? These were expensive objects. A single manuscript could take years to produce and cost the equivalent of a small farm. The parchment alone represented the hides of hundreds of animals. Every page was a significant investment of material and labor. And yet, on the margins of a psalter commissioned by a wealthy patron for devotional use, someone painted a monkey stealing spectacles from a sleeping man. The answer, as best we can reconstruct it, is that the margins were understood as a separate space. The text was sacred and untouchable. The borders were the territory of the illuminator, and within those borders, a considerable degree of creative freedom was permitted, perhaps even expected. Some scholars argue the marginal images served as visual commentary on the text, a kind of illustrated sermon running alongside the scripture. Others see pure entertainment, a way of keeping the reader engaged through a long and difficult book. Still others point to the carnivalesque tradition in medieval culture, the sanctioned release of social pressure through humor and inversion. The honest answer is probably all of these at once. Medieval people were not a monolith. Some patrons wanted piety, some wanted drama, some wanted to laugh. And the illuminators, working within the constraints of their commission, found ways to do all three. To understand Marginalia, you have to understand the Bestiary. The Bestiary was one of the most popular books in medieval Europe. Part natural history, part moral guide. It described the animals of the world and drew religious lessons from their behavior. The pelican, which was believed to feed its young with blood from its own breast, became a symbol of Christ. The lion, which supposedly breathed life into stillborn cubs, represented the resurrection. The animals in Marginalia draw heavily on bestiary tradition, but in the margins, the moral lessons get scrambled. The animals stop being symbols and start being characters. They develop personalities, grievances, ambitions. They pick up weapons. The rabbit is a perfect example. In the bestiary, the rabbit is a timid creature, a symbol of cowardice and vulnerability. In the margins of a dozen 14th century manuscripts, the rabbit has had enough. Rabbits hunt humans. Rabbits hang hunters. Rabbits sit in judgment over their former tormentors with the gravity of magistrates. This is the world turned upside down, and medieval audiences loved it. Among the recurring figures in medieval Marginalia and manuscript illustration, one of the strangest is the Cynocephalus. The word is Greek. Cyno means dog. Cephalus means head. Dog-headed humans. These figures appear throughout medieval manuscripts, maps, and travel literature. They show up in the margins of Bibles. They populate the edges of the known world on medieval maps, placed there alongside other monstrous races that supposedly lived beyond the boundaries of Christendom. Saint Christopher himself, in some Eastern Christian traditions, was depicted as a Cynocephalus before his baptism transformed him into human form. The dog head was not always a mark of evil. Sometimes it simply marked otherness, the condition of living outside the community of the saved. Where did the idea come from? Partly from ancient Greek and Roman texts that described monstrous races at the edges of the world. Partly from the medieval tendency to imagine the unknown as a kind of inverted mirror of the known. If we are human and Christian and civilized, then the people beyond our borders must be animal and pagan and wild. It is a fascinating and troubling subject, and one that deserves more time than we can give it here. A channel called Studio Historiae has done a deep and rigorous exploration of the Cynocephali that is well worth your time. We will put a link in the description. They are doing the kind of work we aspire to, and we are glad they exist. If you spend enough time with medieval Marginalia, certain images begin to repeat. They appear in manuscripts from different countries, different decades, different religious traditions. Nobody fully understands why these particular images became so widespread. But here they are. The knight and the snail. The snail may leave a trail of slime behind him, but a little slime will do a man no harm. Whilst if you dance with dragons, you must expect to burn. George R.R. Martin wrote that in The Mystery Knight. He was not writing about medieval manuscripts, but he might as well have been. This is possibly the most common image in all of Gothic Marginalia. Medievalist Lillian Randall identified over 70 instances of knight versus snail combat in 29 manuscripts dating from the late 1200s to early 1300s. Her leading theory: The snail represented the Lombards, Germanic moneylenders who were resented across Europe, but financially indispensable, which would explain why the knight looks so conflicted. Other theories include the resurrection, the slow creep of death, the insularity of the ruling class, and the oppression of the poor. The honest answer, as with most marginalia, is that we do not know. And that uncertainty is part of what makes it so compelling. For a deeper look at the knight and the snail, Open Culture has an excellent article, and the Vox Almanac video by Phil Edwards is well worth your time. We will put links in the description. The world of animals dressed as humans, foxes in bishop's robes preaching to geese, pigs playing bagpipes, cats herding mice, rabbits running schools. These images tap into a deep vein of social satire. The fox in clerical dress is not subtle. Neither is the congregation of geese sitting wrapped beneath his sermon. The butt trumpet, there's no delicate way to say this. Medieval illuminators had a genuine enthusiasm for depicting the human posterior as a musical instrument. These images appear in manuscripts across Northern Europe, always drawn with the same deadpan precision applied to the sacred images on the same page. The juxtaposition was apparently not considered a problem. And the rabbit revenge fantasy. Armed rabbits, triumphant rabbits. Rabbits in the roles of hunters, judges, executioners. The creature that exists to be hunted, turning the tables with evident satisfaction. It is one of the great recurring jokes of medieval art. And it lands just as well 800 years later. Here is what Marginalia actually tells us about medieval people. They were funny. Not accidentally funny, not funny in ways they did not intend. Deliberately, carefully, sometimes brilliantly funny. The humor in these images is constructed. It requires setup and payoff. It assumes an audience that will get the joke. They were subversive. Within the sacred space of the manuscript, they carved out room for the absurd, the irreverent, the politically pointed. The fox in bishop's robes is commentary on the church. The rabbit hanging the hunter is commentary on the hunt. These images had an audience that understood them, and they were human in the most recognizable way. They got bored. They got rebellious. They looked at the solemn text in front of them, and somewhere in the back of their minds, a voice said, "But what if the rabbit had a sword?" We know that voice. We have all heard it. That is the thing about Marginalia. It crosses the 800 years between us without any effort at all. The snail knight lands. The butt trumpet lands. The rabbit with the hangman's rope lands. Because the people who made these images were not so different from us. They just had better margins.
So, armed rabbits, butt trumpets, dog-headed saints, knights losing to snails. This is what was happening in the margins of the holiest books in medieval Europe. And I find that deeply reassuring. Don't forget, there are 2 Easter eggs hidden in this episode. Find one, drop it in the comments on YouTube, and I'll send you a free Ignorant Artist sticker. Just comment what you found, and we'll get in touch. Next episode, we're heading to the Celtic tradition, the Book of Kells, the Lindisfarne Gospels, the interlaced patterns that somehow feel completely contemporary. That one's going to be something. I'm Don Hudgens. This is Ignorant Artist. Ignorant don't mean stupid.